If you enjoy the typical pain and misery of cardio, but also like when your neighbors stare at you, then you're gonna love this sled. And I hope you enjoy this review as much as I've enjoyed explaining to my neighbors just what this is.
What are you doing?
It's just a sled workout. The Xebex XT3 sled brings a lot to the table with how quiet it is, its smoothly applied magnetic resistance, as well as the ability to add plates to it. There's various handle options, not only with the movable tri-handles in the back, but the low handle in the front provides some versatility as well. And the attachment points in the front and the back allow for even more ways to use this thing, like with a harness or straps, for example. Now, it's not an entirely original idea, as we already have the Torque Fitness Tank M1, which this has drawn inspiration from, and there's of course the original magnetic resistance sled, the XPO Trainer. Now, they all do a lot of the same things, but this is a bit of an evolution of the wheeled sled, as they've tried to provide as much utility as possible into an established three-wheel design. Though it's not without its flaws, but as we'll see in a minute, Xebex has already addressed the main one everyone mentions, resistance. I found a renewed interest in sleds after listening to Knees Over Toes Guy, because as I've gotten older, it seems my invincible youth is slipping away, and I've had to actually think about things before doing them, says the guy riding a mini bike with a safety squat bar on his back. My number one goal when lifting is to keep up with my kids, and that's so I can enjoy every minute I get with them, and so that they don't worry about me like I worry about my parents. So to combat some of the knee discomfort I was noticing during squatting, I started doing some research, and whether I've done the right things or not, I don't know. I'm just some idiot online, but I can say without a doubt my knee pain is gone. I'm not saying that's entirely from this sled. It's from a lot of things, but this is one of the tools I've used to build up knee strength. Let's talk about what this does well, which will also reveal a few of the things I'd have originally said need to be changed in the next version, which is literally coming out next week. But no worries if you have this version, because it can still be retrofitted. The strength of the Xebex sled is in its versatility, and that's even when up against its main competitor, the Torque M1. Now, they're both three-wheeled sleds, which make them much quieter than a traditional sled, though the resistance is applied through the front wheel rather than through the skis, but they can still be used in many of the same ways. The XT3 has an advantage in versatility over Torque sled, though, because of the attachment points, though we will get to the issue with the front attachment points in a minute. But they add to the utility of it, as well as the fact that this sled can be used as a wheelbarrow, or wheelbarrow as Winnie passionately defends it's called, out of the box, versus the tank, where it's an additional thing you've got to purchase, and then you've got two sets of handles to worry about. There are a lot of ways to work out with this thing, since you can work it from the front or the back, and you can use your favorite harness, or if you're more into ropes or chains, well, the XT3 has you covered, and we don't judge here. I'm not actually sure where I got these chains, but it's probably from my Bells of Steel belt squat, which I've promised to review for like 8 months now. So as always, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next time I make this same exact joke after not reviewing it yet again. This is probably a good time to apologize to GetRx, since they reached out to me about reviewing this thing and sent it to me, I would say maybe like 10 months ago, and well, here it is. It's not that I don't like it, actually quite the opposite. It's just that creating content is really hard and takes forever, but my incompetence has been rewarded this time, because now I'm the first to reveal the changes to the new model. All right, back on track. With the attachment points and front and rear handles, you can push and pull this thing in a lot of different ways. And if you put in any type of distance or speed on this sled, it's a hell of a workout. And if you're drawing a blank on what to do with it, or a lazy YouTuber looking for creative ways to make pretty clips to distract your viewers while you talk on camera, well, you could check out their library of exercises. This sled has these tri-handles, which are easy to move around and can be oriented in either direction depending on how you like it, which will allow you creative types to figure out interesting ways to utilize this sled. But for me, I mostly use them with the long side on the back side. They also have this smooth powder coat, which can get a bit slippery and may leave you looking for a little more grip as you get all wet and sweaty. They can also be inserted into the rear for wheelbarrow carries, which it works pretty well for, though I wish you could add more weight to it, as the weight capacity for single-wheeled exercises is 225 pounds, which is something I looked up after using it for many months and maybe putting more than that on it. But don't go snapping this thing in half and say, Gluck told you it could go over its capacity. I just can't read. That weight capacity jumps to 385 pounds when you've got all three wheels on the ground, but since it's a wheeled sled, at least with this version, you won't really use the first few settings. They just don't provide enough resistance. And even with the magnetic resistance at its highest setting, which it goes 1 to 8 by the way, it doesn't provide as much resistance as the Torque M1. But if you already own one of these and get the retrofit kit, which costs around $80, it'll increase the top end resistance by about 25%, giving this sled the most resistance of any three-wheeled sled on the market. That kit increases the lower levels of resistance, which should actually make them useful. The new sled, called the XT3 Plus, is literally just this sled with the kit already installed, and it comes out within the next week, and we'll replace this one on the site. So if you're interested, you can check out the links in the description. Now, even with those changes, you're not going to rival the resistance a Prowler sled can create, though with the variable magnetic resistance and the ability to add plates to it, whether you're a beginner or trying to impress people on YouTube in your B-rolls, this thing probably has you covered. But if you're strongman training and following those types of percentages, just realize it doesn't cleanly translate, or versus really any traditional sled, it's hard to quantify the weight you'd put on one of those versus one of these. That's not to say it can't create a hell of a challenging workout and that you can't build muscle by using one, as it does increase the resistance the harder you push or pull. But if you're really into heavy stuff and that's your main goal, I'd probably stick to a Prowler. You can of course add more plates to increase the difficulty a little bit or push it up at incline, but just think that one through a little bit because, well, I'm not even halfway there. I actually always run mine with plates on it. Random side note, while I'm thinking about it, they need to add UHMW or something here because your plates will destroy this powder coating if you're not using bumpers. Anyway, adding weight only adds a little bit of resistance to the sled since it's rolling on wheels. What the plates mostly do is keep this front wheel from slipping, which can be an issue since that's the tire resistance is applied through. So if it gets lifted up or slips, the movement gets choppy. That's only ever been an issue for me when attaching something to these front low points and then pulling upward with like a sled row, for example. But I've been able to combat that by using my cheap Amazon toe strap and then wrapping it around the top of this low handle, or just doing that type of pull from the other side. It's a workaround for sure, and an area where the tank has an advantage as their attachment point on the low handle is up top, but the tank doesn't have any attachment points on the back. I don't really find it to be an issue once you're familiar with the sled since it goes both ways, but you could also awkwardly turn it around and always work it from behind. We had some questions on our Instagram about how well it performs on various surfaces, because the ability of a wheeled sled to work on different surfaces is a big appeal to one of these things. It obviously works very well on concrete or asphalt. The front wheel doesn't slip, and it's very quiet. It works surprisingly well on gravel, though it will pick up stones and deposit them inside here. So every time I lift it up to store it, you'll hear and see them kind of running out. Side note, it stores upright, chopping its 4-foot by 28-inch footprint down to 2 feet. And maybe I shouldn't admit this as a reviewer, but I didn't realize it could do that until I had it for a few months. Also, I'm sure gravel and dirt will increase maintenance and probably isn't good for this chain drivetrain, but mine hasn't had any issues yet. Last note on gravel, I probably slipped more than the front tire did, but as you pick up speed or with less weight on the sled, the front tire will slip some. So it'll work, but it's not an ideal surface. On grass, it works pretty well when loaded up. And pro tip, if you want extra resistance, just don't mow your lawn like me. Sure, you'll eventually destroy your grass if you keep using the same path, but that's where I use mine most of the time, and mine has held up well so far. My sled has the optional console, which is a nice upgrade, though it's a bit pricey at $110. It's got a backlit LCD screen that's about 4 inches by 5 inches, which displays your typical metrics like distance, speed, calories burned, and so on, and you can connect it to various apps through Bluetooth or ANT+, and can even program it to do intervals. It's very similar to what you see on a lot of cardio and equipment, and if it doesn't sound like I'm very impressed with it, it's more that I've learned to hate this thing as I watch it mock me as it slowly counts towards the end of my workouts. If you don't get the console, it comes with a phone holder, but I can't really comment on how well it works because I threw mine away because, I mean, as a reviewer, why would I ever need that? Either way, the display rotates 180 degrees so you can view it from the front or the back. And it's an upgrade over the Torque Tank because it doesn't have a display. You have to buy their phone clamp. That being said, GetRx needs to tweak the design a little bit because if you don't have the console, these display wires just kind of hang out in the back exposed. Of course, there are cheaper ways to do this because this is by no means a budget sled. Actually, pretty much any traditional sled is cheaper. Hell, you could just pull a bag of sand on grass, but these wheeled sleds do have their advantages. Of course, I should also mention you really need some space to use this because I've got like 28 feet in here and I just don't find it enough. So I basically always use it outside. Price-wise, it's very similar to the Torque Tank M1, though the M1 becomes more expensive as you load it up with options like with their wheelbarrow handles. But the XT3 cost about another $100 to ship to me, whereas Torque includes the shipping in their price. The Xebex XT3 is the more feature-rich of the two, and Torque's has more plastic to it because this enclosure right here on theirs is made of plastic. Not that I really see that as being a problem, but that does keep the Torque's weight down some, which is important since it can be stored on the wall if you purchase their storage system, but it is another added expense, and the tank doesn't store upright like this one does. GetRx does like to run deals though, so you may be able to get this one for a little less, and of course, the XT3 has its own accessories you can purchase for it, like the consoles and their shoulder straps, which I'd recommend over my toe strap because it doesn't really fit your shoulder that well. Originally, I'd have said with a few small tweaks, this thing would be incredible and that it was already pretty good. But the change to the resistance system erases my biggest issue with it. I still think they should move the front attachment point up to the top of the handle, which is something I've learned to work around, but otherwise I'm very happy with this thing. It's made in Taiwan, and with its mostly steel construction, I can see why they've given it a 10-year frame warranty, though the parts and console are only a 1-year warranty. But based on how simple and well made it is, I expect it'll last quite a while. As to if I think it's better than the M1, I'd have originally said they were pretty even, with the tank's powder coating and maybe build quality being a little bit nicer, but that resistance change really pushes me a little bit more towards this one. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more from Xebex and GetRx, make sure you subscribe because we're reviewing their FID AB2 adjustable bench and other equipment in the future. Like and comment to help boost us on the algorithm. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.